welcome to my channel. My name is Martine, and if you are new here, I do videos on Vedic astrology mainly, but also with some tropical insights, and I focus on both relationship and natal astrology. And if you like this video and you would like to see more content from me, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to my channel. Also consider clicking the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, if you are interested in a private reading, I do readings in astrology on a variety of topics ranging from relationship readings to career to transits for 2-3 years, or solar return charts or predictions for 1 year, etc. You are free to email me at the email address that I will leave in the video description, and I can send you a pricing list and reading options and any other details that you might require. Also, I want to mention that I have started membership options on this channel, and the short of it, just to give you the short perks that you will get if you choose to join the membership section, you will get 1 extra video per month for each membership stage or tier. So for the first tier, you will get 1 extra video per month. For the second tier, you will get 2 extra videos per month, so you will have access to level 1 and level 2 videos. And for level 3 or third tier, you will get 3 extra videos per month. The level 1 and level 3 videos are going to be on a variety of topics, so basically anything related to astrology, but it will be content that is not shown on my regular usual videos, right? So this is members only exclusive content, and it can range from, tips and tricks on how to read a horoscope to, I haven't done this yet, but I plan on doing maybe members only astrological synastry for famous couples, for instance, or the analysis of famous people's horoscopes, but then I can also get into divisional charts, etc., etc. So all kinds of things. The level 1 or second tier of membership options is especially related to synastry astrology topics, meaning relationship-oriented astrology. So this could be things like how to discover which kind of partner archetype is right for you according to your horoscope, or it could be, again, different characteristics, whether you're going to have a good marriage according to your horoscope or a less than stellar marriage. But you can find more concrete examples in the lists that you will find in the video description, because I have added the playlists where you can already see all the videos that I have posted in each members section. So yeah, you can see what videos you will have access to from the ones that I have already done. But I will continue to post, like I said, 1 extra video per month for each level of membership. And in addition to that, in the members only section, you will have access to members only polls, and you will also have priority when it comes to getting your comments replied to on my channel. And you will also have stickers that basically show up next to your username that show that you are a member, and a couple of exclusive emojis. All right, so that's pretty much all the perks that you can have as a member on my channel. If you're curious, you can check the video description for more details as well, or you can click the join button under any of my videos to also see the prices, because the prices will be shown in your local currency. All right, in addition to the members only section, I also have a tarot channel, and I post there semi-regularly, and I will be linking the tarot channel in the video description as well as in the pinned comment. It's called Martine's Tarot. So if you are curious about tarot, if you're into it, maybe check out my channel, maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening to this intro. And now I'm going to get straight into today's topic. So welcome to another video from me. Today's topic is going to be on something that I thought about, again, relatively spontaneously. And it is related to other topics that I have talked about, like the Sun-Ketu conjunction video and the bad childhoods video that I did a while ago. So I will be linking those in the video description as well. But today I really wanted to focus on the topic of basically men with daddy issues. I don't want it to sound like offensive, but I couldn't think of like a better way to express the topic than calling it men with daddy issues. And as an introduction, I wanted to say that the reason I wanted to talk about this is that, you know, in my readings, and especially with people that I have known personally, I've seen a lot of these psychological patterns play out, of men who have daddy issues, but you rarely see society focusing on these topics. Instead, you see society mocking women for having daddy issues and how these women are attention seeking and might have poor boundaries sexually, or might tend towards promiscuity sometimes, depending on the situation, whatever the situation might be. But the bottom line is that daddy issues, I think, at least as far as I have observed, affect men to the same degree, if not even in higher numbers, but they play out differently because of the different social pressures that are, placed on men versus women, and, the whole psychological development process that happens differently for men than it happens for women. And I have said this, I'm pretty sure, also in the Bad Childhoods video and in the Sun K2 conjunction video, that I think it's fair to divide the different kinds of daddy issues into two main categories. There's the absent father situation, which is often seen with K2 being involved. So if you see like Sun conjunct K2, that is a very strong indicator. I've also mentioned this in the Sun K2 conjunction video, how I have noticed it through reading charts that many men who have a lot of like behavioral issues, even things like promiscuity, dealing with promiscuity and dealing with, sex addictions and stuff like this, low self-esteem, whatnot, tend to have Sun conjunct K2, or they have K2 aspecting the Sun to a lesser degree by K2's special aspects, which are the 5th and the 9th aspect. But then you might also see this with, let's say, K2 in the 9th house, K2 in the 10th house, because the 10th and the 9th houses are also signifiers of the father archetype and the relationship with the father. I'm talking about the natal horoscope. You could also see it like this. To some extent, maybe you might see it with the 2nd and the 4th houses, but usually not as much, because the 2nd, when you have like the 2nd house being connected to K2, that could mean that both parents were absent. So in a way, you could also put those men in the same category, but you would have to look at what other, configurations are going on in the horoscope to get more clear indicators that, the person has specific daddy issues, so to speak. You might, when K2 is connected to the 4th house, it tends to show like an absent mother figure a lot of the times. And so there's like the absent father daddy issue type, and then there's like the abusive father daddy issue type, which is more often seen with things like aspects from Mars to the Sun. Sometimes Mars even involved with, the 4th house, involved with, I talked about in one video, I don't remember which one, I think it was the Bad Childhoods one, but I know that I mentioned this in another video, that Will Smith had Mars in the 4th house, and I watched an interview where he said that his father was abusive, and he actually saw him punch his mother when he was a kid, and to the point where she was bleeding or something like that. So generally when you see Mars involved with anything, actually, but in this case connected to the father signifiers, or even the early home environment, like the 4th house, which technically the 4th house is more of the mother archetype, but it also shows early childhood environment, literally the home base environment. So it might even show, any kind of abuse, including an abusive father happening. But especially when you see like Mars with the 10th house, Mars with the 9th house, when you have, let's say, connections between the 10th and 9th lords with the 12th You might have an absent father because the 12th house is a house of loss. When you have connections between the 9th and 10th lords to the 8th house, for instance, you might have an abusive father, because the 8th house shows, sudden ups and downs, basically a lot of volatility, an environment where you don't know where you stand, and just generally a negative relationship with the father. Also, when the 6th house lord maybe is involved to some extent, it could show maybe like sickness of the father, or it could show a lot of conflicts with the father, but not necessarily abuse of a horrible nature. You see abuse, especially with the 8th house. I've seen it a lot. Anyway, the other type, like I said, the abusive father. So you can see this with Mars aspects to the sun, because again, the sun is the father archetype. You can see it with, like I said, Mars connected to the 10th, the 9th house, or the lords. You can see this with sometimes Rahu connected to the sun as well, because Rahu can tend to show a narcissistic father that is, best case scenario, shallow. Worst case scenario can be a total narcissist who cares a lot about appearances and just getting as much attention as possible, so doesn't have any patience for the child, for instance, doesn't really care much about supporting the child's development. But again, with Rahu, you would also have to look at other signifiers that might indicate significant abuse, because otherwise it can just tend to show a very egomaniacal sort of father. So not that that is healthy, but it doesn't necessarily translate into some of the issues that I'm going to talk about right now. Not necessarily. Again, you have to check the full configurations of the horoscope. Then if you have aspects from Saturn to the sun, especially conjunction between the sun and Saturn. Let's not forget that the Saturn-Sun relationship is a very strong enemy connection. So it's like considered one of the most disturbing enemy connections in Vedic astrology. Basically these are mortal enemies, these planets. And when you see this conjunction, you tend to have a father that is incredibly, maybe not abusive in like a physical sense, but here you could have instances of psychological, emotional abuse. A father that is hypercritical, always puts the child down, always makes the child feel like they're not good enough, So in a way, again, it can also show a narcissistic parent. To some extent, you have this again with the trine or the 10th aspect of, the third or the 10th aspect of Saturn, which are the special aspects of Saturn according to Vedic astrology. And also with the opposition when it comes to Saturn, right? I didn't mention the opposition with Rahu and Ketu because, again, when Rahu is opposite something, that something is going to be conjunct Ketu and vice versa. So, then with the opposition, you have the power of the other node, right? So if you have like, let's say, just to give you an example, if you have like Rahu opposite the sun, it means that you have Ketu conjunct the sun, right? Because Ketu is always opposite Rahu. So that would mean that the Ketu energy is more powerful. It doesn't matter that it's also opposite Rahu. That's what I'm trying to say. So this is why I mentioned with the Rahu and Ketu, which are the nodes of the moon. The second strongest aspects to look for are the 5th aspects and the 5th and the 9th aspects from Rahu and Ketu after the conjunction, which is the strongest aspect. And also what you might also want to take into account are sign interchanges, maybe. Although with Ketu and Rahu, it's a bit tricky, but I would have to do more research on this. And what I mean by sign interchanges is like, let's say you have, what can I think about? I don't know. Is it even possible, actually? Yeah, let's say you have Ketu in Leo and you have Sun in Scorpio, right? So this basically means that the sign that the sun sits in is ruled by Ketu, and then the sign that Ketu sits in is ruled by the sun. So this would be like a interchange. There is a name for it. I think it's Parivartan Yoga, but I'm not 100% sure. And sometimes, especially when it comes to like house lords, this sign interchanging of rulership is seen as a pretty strong connection. For instance, if you have it between house lords, it shows a strong connection between those two houses. With respect to this topic, though, of the absent father, I'm not sure. I would have to do more research on it. Absent father, abusive father, whatever it is. So these are the two main categories that I wanted to talk about, right? So there might also be other slight indicators, and then you also, to some extent, want to look for nakshatras as well, right? So I'm sticking to the D1 chart, but of course you can also see more in-depth things if you look into the divisional charts as well. The Navamsha, the D4 chart, but I won't get into that, all right? You can also see a lot by just looking at the natal horoscope, so there's no point in overcomplicating it. And generally, when you see cases of significant abuse, there are always signs in the natal horoscope, so it's not going to be like everything looks rosy from the natal chart, and then you look at the Navamsha and everything looks messed up. That's not going to happen, right? I've never seen it happen like that. And because, again, usually the divisional charts are just showing more in-depth, how should I put it? Like a more in-depth story than the natal chart, right? In any case, what I wanted to say is nakshatras, right? So if you see certain nakshatras, they are definitely linked to abuse. What I have seen, I don't know if I mentioned this in another video, but I know that I was thinking about it for sure. That I've literally never seen a person have like placements in Purva Bhadrapada or Ardra where there wasn't some level of abuse there. Like, I'm talking, of course, depending on the planet, there might be different types of abuse coming from different people in their lives or something, but there's always generally some theme of abuse. Also, having ascendant in Purva Bhadrapada or Ardra is a very tough one, to have. But especially when you see like the sun, for instance, in Purva Bhadrapada or Ardra, either in the D1 or in the D9, you tend to see an abusive father figure, especially if there are other signifiers on top of this, like aspects from Mars, aspects from Rahu, etc., right? Or sometimes maybe an absent father, depending if there are aspects from Ketu. When you see the moon, for instance, in Purva Bhadrapada or Ardra, again, you could see the same thing with a mother who is abusive emotionally, mentally, sexually, whatever. Sometimes what I have seen, unfortunately, is that placements in Bharani, again, either in the D1 or in the D9 chart, tend to show situations of sexual abuse, because Bharani is connected to a theme of incest. And, I'm sorry if I'm making anyone cringe, because it is a cringy subject. But I have seen it so often, unfortunately, where, and when I say the word abuse, I'm not just talking about, outright, I don't know, like, I don't want to use the word, but the R word, the RAPE word, that's not the only form. I'm talking even things that can be very subtle, like inappropriate, subtle, let's say weird energies coming from the parents or from a relative, maybe not the parents, depending on the situation, that could happen. When you have what I've seen also with Vishaka, I think I've mentioned this in another video, moon in Vishaka, I've seen it a lot where the person has had some kind of an abusive environment growing up. There is a connection between Vishaka and something about, karma connected to the father. So even if the moon technically is the mother archetype, it can show an abusive father. So moon or sun in Vishaka could show, again, some abuse. Again, if you see other aspects that point to this, it further hints to that direction, right? So again, if you have like aspects from Rahu, Ketu, Saturn, Mars, it's even more likely that something happened there. And when I say abuse, I'm talking about anything that is basically perceived as traumatic from the part of the child. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like something that would render someone, how should I put it, worthy of being taken into custody, police custody or something. It can be anything that is just seen as inappropriate, traumatizing to the child, whatever. So it can be all kinds of things. Another thing is, so I said Vishaka. Also, Mula tends to be difficult. Magha, especially if Magha appears on malefic planets in the D1 chart. I don't know about the D9. I haven't studied it this much, but it could be also in the D9. But in the D1, when you have planets in Maga, especially malefics, it could be showing, in fact, a transgenerational problem, because Maga is connected to ancestors, right? So yeah, if you have like Mars in Maga, or Ketu in Maga, or Rahu again, or Saturn, basically the main malefics, the usual suspects, to some extent maybe the sun, but the sun is not as malefic as the traditional malefics. Yeah, there could be, like I said, transgenerational traumas going on, especially connecting, sometimes connected to abuse, sometimes connected to neglect, where you have Ketu, for instance, or absentee sort of fathers. And again, when I talk about neglect, I'm not just talking about fathers that abandon their kids. It could be fathers that are physically there, but they have no connection to the child whatsoever. I mean, this used to happen all the time in previous generations, where people would stay married in dead marriages for centuries. I mean, decades. And I mean, centuries if they were vampires. They would stay together, in dead marriages, and there was no real emotional connection going on, and the child definitely felt neglected and all that. So yeah, this is like trying to cover the full, the widest range of potential configurations that could show daddy issues here. I'm sure that there are some that I haven't even mentioned, that I haven't considered, because I don't have a script for this recording or anything. So maybe I'm gonna do an update if I think of any other things, but these are the main ones, right? To some extent, also, if you want to get into tropical, you might see Pluto aspects. Pluto aspects to the sun, maybe Pluto in the 4th house, the 5th house. Right, the 4th house, again, the early life environment. 5th house generally tends to show bad childhood. 10th house, again, could be power struggles with the father figure. But with respect to Pluto, I would have to, do more research, because I haven't looked at Pluto that much, to be honest. I have seen Pluto a lot being effective when it comes to analyzing synastry, but I'm not sure with respect to this topic of how much it affects the personal relationship to the parent. Yeah, but it could be. So again, if you have Pluto aspects and you are willing to share some experiences connected to your childhood, please do so in the comments. It would help the research. All right. Aside from that, what I wanted to say is that these two main types of father issues or daddy issues lead to from what I've noticed, a similar set of behaviors. And basically, the main thing that I've noticed with men who have daddy issues is that they spend their entire lives trying to impress other men. And this tends to spell problems in relationships, because it tends to make them bad fathers and bad husbands. All right, I'm going to be blunt here. And what do I mean by that? What I'm trying to say is that in a relationship, women need a man's full support and presence, right? But these men who develop daddy issues, either because they didn't have a father figure, or again, because they had a really abusive father figure that made them feel like they're never good enough, they spend their entire lives basically listening to other men, sometimes guiding their entire lives according to other men. And especially with the Sun Ketu aspect, I've seen this a lot, where they will almost like parentify or idealize their friends, their friendship circles, or sometimes if they have other male figures like brother figures, cousins, uncles, whatever, sometimes they will do the same thing with their bosses at work. They're constantly seeking to get the boss's approval, to get another pat on the back. And especially with Ketu, I've talked about this more in depth with the Sun-Ketu conjunction. It tends to show, because here's the thing, having an absent father, and this is how astrology backs up psychology ultimately, having an absent father ultimately leads to low confidence. And you see this in women as well. And whereas in women, having low confidence, low self-esteem could translate into things like becoming promiscuous, seeking validation and attention from men through sexuality. On the other hand, it could also, in today's world especially, it can also manifest exactly the same way as it does for men, which is that women are constantly trying to impress men through maybe their competence or by impressing superiors at work with how smart they are, or somehow, looking for some kind of a father figure in a way. But when it comes to men, it really hinders their confidence, their self-esteem, to the point where they, especially early on in life, are very affected by their friend circles, by their entourage. And I'm actually going to get to the topic of entourage a little bit towards the end, because I have done some fun research about the main actor who played the lead in Entourage and how he actually has Sun K2 contacts. But again, I won't get into it right now. So the bottom line is that these men basically are the kind of men that will not make a move without the approval of the friend circle, and they will be always desperate to have friends. And that's another thing, so it might even get to the point where they will not even marry a certain woman unless the friendship circle approves of her, right? Because they're always like seeking that validation of getting that pat on the back, and like until the leader of the pack says, "Good for you, son, you have chosen a good wife," they might not seal the deal because they're not capable of standing on their own and, missing that validation and that support from a male figure. And I've seen this, I don't know if I've mentioned this in the other video, but I definitely saw this in like an acquaintance of mine, that I used to know in college. I used to go to college with her, and she told me the story of, like, I told her that I was into astrology, and she asked me to check her synastry with her ex-fiance, who was this guy that was very significant to her, so she was at the point where they broke up. She was like, I think 24, and he was like maybe 2 or 3 years older than she was, and she was like very convinced that she was going to marry this guy because they were very close, they had a very good connection. They were very, happy. I mean, from her perspective, at least, it was a very fulfilling relationship. And she was convinced that she was, basically heading towards walking down the aisle. And basically what happened was that when she went to university at the age of 19, so when she went to university, they had already been together for, I don't know, I think 2 or 3 years or something, or like at least 1 year in any case. And throughout the time when she was in university in a different city, basically, she stayed faithful to him, would visit regularly and all this stuff. And meanwhile, his friends started to interfere in his life and started to tell him that, she's not good enough for him, that she moved to a different city. She basically left him, that she is almost certainly unfaithful. And she heard all of these things, like through a mutual acquaintance that, knew someone from his friendship circle. Of course, she didn't hear this from him. And she was like really distraught that basically this guy, what happened was that he could not stand up to the entourage. Like, he could not just say, you know what, F you guys, this is the girl that I like, and if you don't like it, you can piss off, which I think is something that, a person with high confidence and self-esteem would say, like, if this is the person that makes you happy, then you shouldn't be listening to someone else, right? And so in any case, he didn't have the strength to do that. So eventually he broke up with her, and she was like completely distraught about it. She didn't understand what it was about because, again, they had a good relationship aside from the fact that this guy had no backbone. But anyway, so she gave me his date of birth. So I didn't know like the full horoscope, but what I did see was that he had Sun in Libra, which already is debilitated. That's a debilitated sun. And it was aspected by K2. All right. So already right off the bat, I knew that, oh, this guy, he doesn't have, he's always going to listen to his friends. Like, maybe not always, but definitely in his 20s, which was his case. I think he was like in his late 20s. He's definitely going to prioritize the entourage's, approval above you, basically. And really, it was really sad because in the grand scheme of things, I think, just intuitively, what the issue was that this woman was actually very attractive. I mean, she was someone who was, I think she had participated in like, modeling competitions. She was a Miss something. I think she was the Miss of her city or something like. And she was very attractive. Like she was definitely the kind of woman that pretty much any man would consider well above attractive. And I think what actually happened was that the guy's friends were just jealous of him, that he bagged this really attractive woman. And the guy in question was also, I think he was like in the police academy or I don't know if he was a police officer or he was studying to be a police officer. Anyway, so and he had this kind of like gang of friends / coworkers that he was always hanging out with, who basically swayed his head, persuaded him to change his mind about this woman. Anyway, that was my perception of things. So that's just to give you an example, but I have seen this a lot. And in fact, one of the first things that I notice whenever I see a man who has, Sun conjunct Ketu especially, or like even with Ketu aspecting the Sun, is that they are always talking about their friends. Like their friends are like the center of their universe. These are the kinds of men that are most likely to say things like bros before hoes, like, and again, I'm not trying to say that friendship is a bad thing, but like I illustrated in these examples, oftentimes what happens is that these men are just not confident enough to stand up on their own 2 feet. And, they might even either, again, be easily influenced by their friends, especially when they're young, or they're like constantly seeking approval. They constantly want to look for this like father figure that is going to give them constant validation and, tell them that they're on the right track. And it becomes such a compulsion for them that this is way more important than, the romantic partner or even the career sometimes, because if you're looking at these people's lives, early on, they might even listen to their friends when it comes to what college to go to or stuff like this. So it's like almost like they're married to their friends before they're married to their actual wives, if they get married even. Or sometimes they're married to work. Again, what I've actually seen with the other category of men, actually, I've seen this actually in both cases, honestly. It's just that there are slight differences, right? In both cases, meaning both when you have an absent father and also when you have an abusive father, it tends to show this like lifelong pursuit of validation from male figures, particularly male authority figures, right? So what you see a lot of the times with men who have abusive fathers is a stronger pattern of love-hate relationships with men. So like they will have at least 1 or 2 significant conflicts with some kind of male authority figure. I've seen this with a lot of cases, when you see a really damaged sun in a man's chart, you see, cases like, I was screwed over by this university professor who couldn't stand me because I was too smart for him. Or, sometimes even troubles with the law. That could be another thing. See, here's the thing. I actually, based on astrology, at least I've seen troubles with the law a lot more often based on abusive father figures rather than absent father figures. But let me not get into that whole single mother, MG Tao, feminist topic of debate right now. But just as a fun fact is all I'm going to say. And in any case, yeah, so you see like conflicts with authority figures, but then you also see the same pattern of, on the other hand, constantly trying to seek approval. And if the father figure is still alive, right, when you're talking about a few abusive father figures, they will sometimes never stop looking for the father figure's approval and validation. So like they spend their entire lives trying to impress their fathers, right? Or sometimes if the father is very abusive, they will spend their entire lives trying to one up the father, right? So it's kind of like they will keep succeeding just to piss off the father figure and to kind of rub it in the face of the father figure of like, see, I'm much better than you thought I was going to be. Or again, what I'm trying to say, simultaneously, they will also put a lot of emphasis on male relationships, so they again will care a lot. So like even though on the surface they might put on a front of like, F my father, he's an asshole, whatever. On the same level, they're like constantly seeking for male approval and validation, sometimes looking for, again, friendship circles, superiors at work, gurus, religious leaders, whatever you want to call it. So any kind of male figure that is kind of like in a semi-authority position, especially, is going to play out as a good father substitute in these men's minds, and they're going to prioritize these relationships. Oh, I'm especially looking at this from the perspective of women who get attracted to these kinds of men and who end up in relationships with them, is that they don't realize oftentimes that these men will, especially if they are narcissistic, which is a possibility, because again, having an abusive or absent father figure is one of the things that could lead to, personality disorders like narcissism or even worse things, right? So one of the things that women don't realize is that how these men will basically not prioritize them and their families once they have families. And in fact, they might even get to the point where they're still married to their friends, and it's like they don't care that, I don't know, it's the kid's anniversary. They still want to go to the annual the annual hiking or fishing trip or whatever the hell it is, right? So it's like they will always kind of like prioritize. Now, it could, of course, I'm not trying to say that it's like that's it, they're messed up for life and nothing could ever change. As I have mentioned, and other astrologers have mentioned as well, Rahu and Ketu, especially Ketu, tends to mature after the age of 40, right? So as time progresses, they tend to get better, but it also takes a certain amount of effort on the part of the person. So it takes a certain amount of effort and self-awareness and maybe going to therapy and understanding these issues of like, wait a minute, why am I prioritizing? But oftentimes it causes also a lot of suffering because, as usual with all psychological issues, the men in question could be very unconscious. They could have this total blind spot about why they do the things that they do, right? So they may not even be aware of the fact that they're constantly seeking validation and that they are, let's say, emphasizing other men's approval too much, sometimes at the detriment of their own interests, because again, if you're looking at like the example that I gave you with this woman whose fiance broke up with her, like, was it actually in his interest to break up with this woman who was gorgeous and very intelligent and hardworking and loyal to him? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, he really fucked up majorly, and she's fine. Meanwhile, she found another man, but, it took her a while to recover and she didn't understand what she did wrong about this. And I was like the one who actually said to her, like, look, this guy has self-esteem issues and he's gonna, he's at this age where he's going to listen to his entourage more than the girlfriend, let's say, right? So any case, this is what I'm trying to say. It's like they might end up worst case scenario in, those situations of like, what am I doing in my life? Because this is the path of anyone who chooses to listen to other people's opinions above what makes them happy personally for any reason, right? So like if you base your entire life on other people's approval and validation and getting a pat on the back, you're never actually getting to a point where you personally feel happy and fulfilled in your life and like you're truly pursuing your destiny. This might also be one of the reasons why, having these painful aspects involving the sun, like especially having with Ketu conjunction, right? It actually leads to things like, self-harm and even self-annihilation, especially with the Sun Ketu. And again, this is backed up by psychology to some extent, because I remember reading this statistic that said one of the greatest predictors of whether a person is going to self-annihilate at some point in their lives is whether they had the loss of a parent before the age of 18. So when it comes to the topic of Sun conjunct Ketu, that could actually be a thing, or Moon conjunct Ketu. Because I've seen it a lot where people who have Moon conjunct or Sun conjunct Ketu, they actually lose a parent to death, early on. Or, of course, it could also be the situation, like I said, where the parent abandons the child, right? But what I'm trying to say is that, I don't want it to sound like fatalistic and, it's perfectly understandable that they would off themselves. But I'm trying to point out that at least part of the reason why maybe they get to that level of misery is because unconsciously they constantly seek for outside validation to such an extent that they never really learn to stand up on their own 2 feet and to say, no, this is what makes me happy. I'm not going to care about your opinions. I'm going to do what makes me feel happy. This is what I'm trying to say. All right. Now, what I wanted to say is like the first thing actually when I was thinking about this topic of, how much men prioritize the entourage, I remembered this TV series called Entourage. Some of you may remember it. I never actually watched an episode. I think I tried to watch one at some point and I got bored. I think it started airing when I was in high school. It was a big deal. It lasted for a few seasons. And just for fun, I do remember that, the main topic of this TV series was basically a bunch of guys who are living together, as the name suggests, right? And it's mainly about this main character who lives mostly with his friends. Like, his friends are a huge part of his life. And out of curiosity, I researched the horoscopes of some of the main actors, especially Adrian Grenier, who was the main actor, and lo and behold, what I found was that he had K2 aspecting his sun, and then I also did a little bit of research about him, and I found articles that said his father was never in the picture. One article actually said that he had an estranged father, and another article said that his parents never married, and that he was basically kind of like the product of a short-term fling, like an affair or something. And I remember thinking like, holy crap, like this makes so much sense because, just the fact that he was offered a role that matched this energy of kind of a guy who was basically in a way a bit of a drifter, basically, because he prioritized the bachelor life and the entourage, quote unquote, to, at the expense of things like maybe having close, intimate relations and having a monogamous relationship and stuff like that. At least for a while. I haven't watched like the series fully, but I know that it was at least part of the show, And then the other actors, like I've come across 2 other actors, I don't remember their names. I think one of them was Matt Dillon, and there was this other one, and one, like, I don't know, one of them was Connolly something, and one of them had Rahu in the 10th house, had Sun opposite Saturn at the same time. The other one, again, had some weird, so basically, like, all of them had some kind of significant, one of them, had Mars aspecting the Sun by 4th aspect. And I've also done, like, more research on them, but there isn't as much information. One thing that I will say is that the other 2 that I checked, didn't have like absent fathers, unlike Grenier, but they had aspects that suggested some kind of abuse from the father, and one of them, the one who had Rahu in the 10th house, also had a father who was an actor. So I remember thinking like, well, that makes sense, first of all, because Rahu is a very materialistic, wanting the spotlight and, kind of, like I said, borderline narcissistic energy. So that makes sense to have a father as an actor, especially since the 10th house is also one of the signifiers of the father archetype. And, again, it didn't actually say anything about these 2 other actors. I couldn't find other information that may suggest, like an abusive father figure or anything. But, looking at the aspects, it could have been some kind of like subtle levels of, boundary breaking and maybe verbal abuse or something. Some kind of friction there with the father figure or power struggles or something. So in any case, I found it quite telling that these 3 main actors that I looked for from Entourage actually fall in the categories that I, have just described previously, meaning having daddy issues one way or another. So yeah, this is pretty much what I wanted to say. Obviously, I don't have like more extensive examples here, but I am basing it a lot, like I said, on like, how should I put it, empirical observations throughout many dozens and dozens of readings that I have done, maybe hundreds, over the years. And I've seen like a pattern. I've seen it a lot, where I think I also mentioned more examples in the Sun K2 chart. Video. So yeah, maybe also check that one out. in any case, this is what I wanted to say. So once again, if you have found this video useful, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notifications bell if you want to see when I will post a new video. Also, please comment in the comment section with any feedback, anything that you would like to share that is maybe related to the topic, would help me with my research. Also suggestions for any videos that you would maybe want me to do in the future. I know that I still have to do a synastry video for, I think, Elon Musk and Grimes. I'm going to be doing that hopefully by the end of the week. Yeah, if you're interested in a private reading, you can find more information in the introductory part of the video or in the video description. Same with membership options. So the main thing about membership options is that I will upload one extra video per member per membership tier. So at every like tier you have access to the previous one. So like level 1 you have 1 extra video per month, level 2 you have 2 extra videos per month, level 3 you have 3 extra videos per month, and the topics are on more in-depth or like little tips and tricks that are connected to astrological insights, either based on my observations or things that are more specific on like, divisional charts, nakshatras. Also, the second tier, which is Astro-Hitchhiker, is specifically focused on relationship-based astrology, including things like understanding the partner archetype in the horoscope or like synastry-related things. And I might even include at some point, more relationship astrological relationship analysis in the Astro-Hitchhiker at some point. So this is pretty much what I wanted to say, and thank you once again for listening. And again, I also have a tarot channel. I will be linking it in the video description as well as in the pinned comment, so go ahead and check it out if you're interested in tarot. Maybe subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you at my next video.